Spock's Star Trek resurrection wouldn't have lasted without Saavik. Spock, Leonard Nimoy, was resurrected by the Genesis planet in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock, but the Vulcans' miraculous comeback would have been short-lived were it not for Lieutenant Saavik, Robin Curtis. Star Trek III was the directorial debut of Leonard Nimoy, which reversed the heroic death of Spock in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. Star Trek III is also the debut of Robin Curtis as Saavik after Kirstie Alley did not return to play Spock's Vulcan protege. After Spock sacrificed himself to save the USS Enterprise in Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, his body was placed in a photon torpedo tube and launched toward the emerging Genesis planet, which was being formed by Khan Noonien Singh's Ricardo Montalban destruction of the Genesis device. Spock's makeshift casket landed safely on the Genesis planet, and the Vulcan was resurrected from infancy by Genesis's life-giving energies. L.T. Saavik and David Marcus, Merritt Buttrick, discovered Spock was alive when they surveyed the Genesis planet, and they all faced calamity from the self-destructing world and from Klingons led by Kruge, Christopher Lloyd. Spock may have been reborn thanks to Genesis, but had L.T. Saavik not arrived and found him, the Vulcan wouldn't have survived for very long. The strange energies of the Genesis planet forced Spock to age in a matter of hours, eventually restoring him from birth to his physical state when Spock died in Star Trek II. But this meant that upon reaching young adulthood, Spock underwent Ponfar, the Vulcan time of mating that happens every 7 years, and is lethal to Vulcans if they don't consummate. L.T. Saavik found the teenage Spock suffering from Ponfar, and she immediately understood what it meant. Star Trek III depicted it tastefully, but Saavik did mate with Spock to help him survive Ponfar. Considering Ponfar occurs every 7 years, and Spock was aging rapidly, it's possible that Saavik aided Spock through his Ponfar more than once. It's safe to say that Spock owes his life to Saavik, and it was fortunate for him that it was his Vulcan protege who found him on the Genesis planet. L.T. Saavik may have been intimately responsible for saving Spock's life, but it was the work of many that fully restored the beloved Vulcan in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Admiral James T. Kirk, William Shatner, risked his Starfleet career, as did the crew of the USS Enterprise, to bring Spock back to Vulcan from the Genesis planet. Dr. Leonard McCoy, DeForest Kelley, also put his life on the line, first by harboring Spock's Katra, or Vulcan soul, in his mind, and then undergoing the ritual to merge Spock with his Katra. Kirk, McCoy, Saavik, and the entire crew of the Starship Enterprise worked together to bring Spock back, although he didn't fully become his Vulcan self until Star Trek IV, The Voyage Home. Meanwhile, David Marcus was killed by Kruge, but Kirk's son also deserves credit for heroically keeping Spock safe. However, before Spock's friends could retrieve him from the Genesis planet, it was L.T. Saavik who gently and crucially cared for the suffering Spock and helped him survive Ponfar in Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. Without Saavik, Spock wouldn't have made it off of Genesis. In the vast universe of Star Trek, few moments are as iconic as Spock's death and subsequent resurrection. The arc, spanning from the Wrath of Khan through the search for Spock, is not just a testament to Spock's enduring character, but also to the intricate relationships that support him. One such relationship, though often underappreciated, is between Spock and Saavik. Saavik, the Vulcan-Romulan hybrid officer introduced in The Wrath of Khan, plays a crucial role in ensuring that Spock's resurrection carries lasting impact, both within the narrative and for the characters surrounding him. While Spock's resurrection is a monumental event in the Star Trek timeline, it's important to consider how it might have been less significant without the presence of Saavik. Saavik's character, portrayed initially by Kirstie Alley and later by Robin Curtis, serves as more than just a subordinate officer to Spock and the crew of the Enterprise. She provides a link between the logical, restrained world of Vulcan and the emotional, high-stakes atmosphere of the Federation's missions. It is through this unique perspective that she becomes integral to Spock's rebirth, both literally and symbolically. Spock's death in The Wrath of Khan is one of the most emotional moments in the history of Star Trek. He sacrifices himself to save the crew, demonstrating the ultimate expression of his often-quoted philosophy. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. His selfless act leaves a void not only in the hearts of the crew, but also in the audience. Spock's loss is deeply felt, yet the story quickly pivots to the potential for his return in The Search for Spock. This transition, however, might have felt contrived or hollow if not for the meticulous groundwork laid by Saavik's role in the narrative. In the search for Spock, it is Saavik who first discovers the signs of Spock's resurrection on the Genesis planet. Accompanied by David Marcus, Captain Kirk's son, she notices the strange life readings that lead to the revelation that Spock has been reborn in a new, younger body. Saavik, being part Vulcan herself, plays a critical role in recognizing the importance of what is happening. Her deep understanding of Vulcan traditions, especially the complexities of the Katra, the Vulcan soul or essence, makes her indispensable in handling Spock's rebirth. One could argue that without Saavik's guidance, Spock's Katra would have been lost forever. Before his death, Spock entrusted his Katra to Dr. McCoy, a human with no comprehension of Vulcan mysticism. Saavik's involvement allows for the transfer of Spock's essence to be understood and honored. Without her, McCoy's possession of Spock's Katra could have spiraled into confusion or worse, an unresolved plotline. Saavik's respect for Vulcan traditions ensures that Spock's resurrection is not just a plot device, but a moment steeped in the rich cultural lore of Vulcan, giving his return the gravitas it deserved. Moreover, Saavik plays a more subtle, emotional role in this arc, particularly in her interactions with the young, reborn Spock. As Spock ages rapidly on the Genesis planet, moving from childhood to adulthood in a matter of days, he is initially devoid of memories, including his friendships, his sense of duty, and his core identity. Saavik's care and guidance during this vulnerable phase are paramount. She helps shepherd Spock through this disorienting period, almost acting as a guardian or protector. In some ways, she serves as an emotional anchor, ensuring that Spock can reemerge not just physically, but as the character fans and the crew know and love. Saavik's role is especially poignant in scenes that highlight her own inner conflict. While she is primarily Vulcan and displays the expected logical restraint, her Romulan heritage also brings a capacity for emotion that she occasionally struggles to suppress. In Spock's resurrection, this internal tension is visible. She must balance her duty to her former mentor with the empathy she feels for the struggling, disoriented young Spock. Her ability to navigate this complex emotional terrain allows the audience to experience Spock's rebirth on multiple levels: physical, spiritual, and emotional. Saavik's presence softens the transition, making Spock's eventual return to his full self more believable and resonant. By the time Spock is fully restored at the end of the search for Spock, Saavik's contributions have solidified her place as a vital part of his journey. While Spock's resurrection is celebrated as a victory for the crew, it's clear that without Saavik's involvement, his return might have lacked the depth and significance that made it memorable. She ensures that Spock's rebirth is more than a convenient reversal of his death. It is a process rooted in the traditions of Vulcan, the loyalty of his comrades, and the emotional stakes that define Star Trek's enduring appeal. Ultimately, Saavik's role in Spock's resurrection serves as a reminder that in Star Trek, no character exists in isolation. Even figures as iconic as Spock require the support and intervention of others to fulfill their destinies. Saavik's presence underscores the importance of connection, culture, and compassion in shaping the journeys of these beloved characters. Without her, Spock's resurrection might have been fleeting, but with her, it becomes a defining moment in the saga of the Enterprise.